in this channel, I have been making some videos about how to get promoted fast and how to climb the ladder and all of that stuff. But what if I told you that doing the exact opposite can also be kind of profitable, and there is a large group of people doing exactly that. So in today's video, I'm going to be talking about a trend that has been born in the last few years, and it's called overemployment. Let's begin by defining what is overemployment. Overemployment is a trend that consists on having multiple full-time jobs and doing them simultaneously. This is not about side hustles, this is not about moonlighting. Normally this is done remotely. There are some cases of people that are able to do this in person. However, that's a little bit more tricky. With the pandemic and the fact that many jobs got remote, this has become a lot more possible. There are many people that, in order to fight inflation and make ends meet, are giving this trend a try. There's a subreddit about this and even a whole website dedicated to the community of people that are trying to do this. It includes frequently asked questions, tips, gear that you might want to buy in order to do this more effectively. And then there's also a whole section dedicated to success stories when people explain how this trend has completely changed their lives. The kind of things that you are going to be advised to do in order to be a successful overemployed person are exactly the opposite that the traditional career advice says that you have to do in order to climb and in order to get promoted and have a successful career. First of all, the idea behind overemployment is not to climb the ladder. In fact, you get off the ladder. If you're already working in a senior level or semi-senior, you are advised to take on junior jobs. So yes, you will basically be demoting yourself. Another thing is that, of course, in order to do this, you are going to work remotely, mostly, and you're going to avoid meetings at all costs and avoid having to meet in person at all costs. The traditional career advice says the opposite, like you have to try to interact in person as much as you can, because when you interact in person often with someone, it is far more likely that that someone will like you and that someone will consider you for promotions, raises, etc. And especially in the context that we live in today with all of the layoffs, well, it is probably going to be a lot easier to fire someone that you have never seen than to fire someone that you are constantly seeing face to face. I am not saying with this that it is okay to discriminate workers based on whether they work remotely or they work in person. I'm just saying that the human brain works in a certain way. Another thing that career coaches are always recommending is to find a job that helps you get into a state of flow. That is a state of mind in which you feel absolutely competent and absolutely engaged with what you're doing, and you completely forget about time. With overemployment, this is kind of tricky. Like, you will be switching between 2 or 3 jobs back and forth all the time. They even recommend the technology with which you can do this, like
for example, like some sort of hub that you have to connect to your multiple laptops or multiple PCs in order to switch from one computer to the other very quickly with just one mouse and one keyboard and one screen.
So yes, I don't see how you can get into a flow state doing that. Overemployment doesn't sound like a very intuitive way to have a successful career and to make more money. However, many people are saying that they are doing this, and thanks to this, they are doubling or tripling their income. So, is this definitely an alternative? Is this something that you should consider doing? Well, to be honest, even though I'm really puzzled about this trend, there is still not enough evidence about it because it is relatively new. I mean, even though people might have been doing this for a long time, it has only become extremely popular after the pandemic. because it was a pandemic what made remote work so popular, and it is remote work what makes this possible, at least at a large scale. I really don't know, and there's really no way to tell what is going to happen with all these people in the long term. Based on the existing evidence, I think that getting into a state of flow is important. Another thing that is interesting about overemployment is that most people advise to lie about it and to hide it. You are even advised to hide it to your friends and to your family and to your significant other. The reason for that is that employers hate it. More on that later. Work tends to be a very important part of a person's life, so I think that having to hide what you do for a living, having to lie about it, I figure that it must be kind of stressing. So I'm not sure if the amount of stress that overemployment involves is really worth it. But from a moral point of view, I honestly couldn't care less. There was a very famous LinkedIn post written by a guy called who is the CEO of a company called Canopy. This guy found that two of the engineers of his company were doing this, and he got really pissed off about it and said this: "Whenever I read the stories in the media about people doing this, I'm usually surprised that they don't make a bigger deal of the core moral issues at play. Working two full-time jobs is stealing. And it also involves a great deal of lying and deception." This guy had to shut comments of this post because apparently someone called him and told him that he wished he would die in a car crash. I absolutely don't support that kind of behavior. However, I have to say, I understand where the rage is coming from. And what this guy said, especially the part that overemployment is stealing, is infuriating. You can only steal something if you don't own that something. That is, if you're not the rightful owner of that something. So when you say that overemployment is stealing, you are essentially saying that workers, who are human beings, by the way, do not own their work. They do not own their time. They do not own their effort. All those things rightfully belong to their employer. For me, that sounds a lot like slavery, and to be honest, it just infuriates me, especially if we see it in the light of the circumstances that we as workers are in. Somewhere after the 1970s, workers' productivity has completely disconnected from wages. That is, even though workers' productivity continued to go up year after year, wages have either stagnated or just go down. Especially for workers who earn middle wages and low wages. Workers that receive the highest salaries, those were not affected by this trend. And that group of workers includes, for example, CEOs. If you bother to go to the Overemployment website and you read the stories of the people that have been doing this, you will see they are not trying to steal anything. It's so clear that they are doing this for survival. They are doing this as a way to cope with the raging inflation that we are experiencing all over the world. Many people say that this changed their life, and overemployment changed their lives because it allowed them to do things like save money, pay off debt, buy very simple things. Like, for example, there was one testimony that said that he had been able to buy a jacket, and one of the last success stories says that was finally able to buy a bed. Yes, a bed. This person was over the moon because he now had a bed. So we've been pushing workers into a corner where they can't afford a bed by doing a normal job. They have to juggle multiple jobs in order to afford a bed, and then we shame them and we call them thieves for doing that. Like, really? What are we doing? So this guy, Davis Bell, said that I guess some people feel that stealing from companies is less wrong than stealing from individuals. In reality, companies are owned by people, either directly in the case of our employees or indirectly by the retirement funds that are invested in venture and private equity and investment funds that own companies. You are stealing from those who are depending on you to get the work done and whose careers ride on the success of the companies for which they work. Yeah, I completely agree. The only thing that this person is apparently forgetting is that workers are also people and they do own their work and their productivity, and that productivity has been systematically being stolen away from them. They are just trying to get it back. To me, he says, this isn't some fun new social trend. It's a new form of theft and deception, and not something in which an ethical, honest person would participate. Of course, no ethical, honest person wants to participate on this. Nobody's doing this for fun. No one likes lying and deceiving, unless of course you're a psychopath. People are doing this more out of necessity than anything else. I don't think that the real question that we should be asking ourselves is, why are workers doing this, or how can we stop workers from doing this? I think the real question is, how can we give workers the productivity that we have taken away from them? That's the real question. That's what needs to be addressed. And that's it for today's video. See you next week.